Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It is 2 o'clock, so we'll start Cabinet Friday, 22nd of November. As usual, it's broadcast live via the County Council's website, is archived, and you can view it later afterwards. For normal, everybody else, please remember microphones on and microphones off when you finish speaking. Apologies for absence, we have none. Minutes, pages 3 to 12. Deborah's a cabinet support item. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of October 2019 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Urgent items, there are none. Declarations of interest, I understand Richard Shepherd has one. Richard?
It's in my role as a member of Charnwood Borough Council, so I need to declare a personal interest as a member of the Borough Council in whose area the proposed development would take place, and also because the Borough Council will be a consultee in the application. However, I do understand I am allowed to speak and vote at the Cabinet meeting.
Thank you, Richard. Sorry, Chief. That was for item 7 for the record. Thank you. So move on to item 4, outcome of the consultation on the County Council's priorities. These are on pages 13 to 20, and we have appendices, pages 3 to 224. A weighty tomb indeed. So the first report today presents a summary of the findings of the recent consultation exercise on the County Council's priorities, which will be used to help inform the refresh of the MTFS. The financial position faced by the County Council remains both serious and extremely challenging, especially bearing in mind we are the lowest funded authority in the country. We have saved 200 million since 2010, having made some very tough decisions. It's worth noting over 4,000 people have responded to the consultation, and I'd like to thank them for doing so. The Council's overview and scrutiny bodies will consider the MTFS, the draft MTFS, in January. Today we've got with us Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, who will present the report. Or are you going to be doing it, Declan? Oh, double act. Then after this, Byron will speak as Cabinet Lead Member. Over to you, To.
If I kick off, I think the leader has kind of set out the tough financial backdrop that we face, and we'll be bringing the next MTFS to December Cabinet. As part of producing the MTFS, we always do consult the residents of Leicestershire, but every kind of 4 or 5 years we do a really thorough consultation. And what you've got in front of you today is the results of that detailed consultation. It's important that we do understand the views of Leicestershire residents, and they will be reflected in the MTFS that you receive in December. Declan will take you through the results. What I will stress is it's not the work of finance, it is actually the work of the Business Intelligence Service. I don't want to take any credit from them. And I'll pass over to Declan.
Thanks, Chris. The last time we did the public consultation, as Chris touched on, was back in 2013. That's when we were preparing for sort of the main sort of austerity era cuts. So the time of this survey is very good in that we're now sort of entering an era where it's more about kind of competing choices between sort of service demand pressures that we're sort of facing. The consultation itself lasted for roughly 13 weeks, running mid-June to sort of mid-September earlier this year. And the main 2 activities were, one was a questionnaire sent to every single household, but also a series of focus groups held that allowed a deeper understanding to be sort of gained about why residents were reaching their various preferences. And there was a range of other supporting activities to either promote it like at various town events, and also an interactive budget tool to just give people a better appreciation of the sort of the balancing act that the budget requires. The leader touched on over 4,000 replies to the questionnaire, which is a really pleasing response. And we verified the response and the methodology with an independent research agency to make sure that kind of the approach is good enough to be able to rely on the results, and they did indeed verify that. The focus groups themselves covered 72 different participants, and they were recruited specifically on different characteristics to make sure they were representative of the county's residents as a whole. And the results of the focus groups and the questionnaire were very similar in nature, which kind of gives you further confidence in relying on the results of the questionnaire, because even when people have the opportunity to sort of ask for further information, they still come to a similar conclusion. The headline survey results are in the report itself in the appendices, so I'll only just pull out a few observations rather than going through them. But the one thing that stands out is all of the top 10 service areas that residents thought could be reduced had expenditure under £10 million each, so they were sort of smaller service areas. So all of the main service areas residents were inclined to protect, so it does give a suggestion that we are allocating the resources broadly in the right way in terms of the public sort of view of sort of service allocation. The top two allocations stand out in that they're sort of reductions stand out in that they both relate to public health, and it does provide a good illustration of why you shouldn't just sort of take the results literally of the survey, and you should sort of think round why maybe people have done it. And the focused groups did provide a greater insight on this, and they could sort of came to the fore sort of residents' frustrations on kind of the almost nanny state type messages, and these frustrations are more likely to relate to sort of national kind of public health messages rather than sort of the local service provision. So it's a useful insight nonetheless, but just care in terms of how we interpret the results. The types of service residents wanted to see protected were primarily services that support vulnerable people, and it showed a good appreciation of these services that we do deliver. And the exceptions in there were sort of highway maintenance, including gritting, but also sort of the waste sort of services as well. Aside from the sort of the service preferences, residents were asked a series of questions about how the council operates, and most were sort of good level support, but most notable ones were sort of people like to see greater integration of services across the public sector, also like to see more working sustainably for sort of protection of the environment, and also they were in favour of finding alternative sources of income. In terms of that last point on income, there was people who were a bit more reticent when it came to charging for services, particularly where it's services people don't have a choice over. Social care being sort of the prime example of that. When questioned about council tax increases, there was generally good support, with most residents supporting above inflation increases, and the context of that was they were asked that it would help to protect services, so that kind of added to the context there. The final point I wanted to share on this sort of the survey results was the improvement in perception of the council after the focus groups. And so before the session started, people were asked about value for money and how the sort of LCC runs the area, and then asked the same question afterwards. And before the session, 31% of people thought we provided value for money. After the session, it was 66%. And how we run the area went from 54% up to 76%. So you can see a really good improvement and a good appreciation as soon as people have got a better understanding of what the council does and the challenges it faces. The MTFS report in December, it'll include some of the initial conclusions of the consultation, but realistically it's going to be sort of over the course of the next year, and sort of where the sort of full impact on resources will sort of come to the fore, and sort of next year's MTFS will be sort of a bit of a deeper kind of reflection of the survey results. Thank you.
Thank you. Byron?
I think that's a very good explanation just been given there. I mean, there have been one or two curious results. I mean, the healthy living one was commented on, and I think there's a lack of understanding out amongst the public that we actually are responsible for public health, and that might give us an indication there that we ought to tell the public more about the role we play, and the fact that public health was transferred from the health service to council some years ago. The other one, which is a really challenging one for someone like me in a rural area, is on public and school transport, where in fact there was little support for doing very much in that field, and yet of course for residents in my area it's of paramount importance. So it just goes to show in some areas of the county people don't see it as of high importance, in other parts they do. So we have to look at some of the results with a little bit of caution, and understand why people respond the way it does. But broadly speaking, what it's indicating is that we're on the right course, and we've got the balance right, particularly between the caring services and the other services. We've always said that we would give our priority to looking after people, and we've done that over the years. And I think that's what this is showing, is that that is appreciated. So I'm happy to move the motion on the Green Order paper.
I'm happy to second it, and while we've got the floor, it would be nice if all the political parties, rather than shoveling money at everything but local government, at least they mentioned us somewhere and promised some money in their manifestos to local government. It's all very well promising the NHS 20 billion here, 20 billion there, with not a mention of local government, when we really are really are struggling with the money we've got. But having said that, I'm happy to second the motion. Okay, we have no other speakers. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Declan. Thank you, Chris. Agenda item 5, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities, proposed transfer of funding within the Dedicated Schools Grant. This is on pages 21 to 28. This report advises Cabinet of the outcome of the consultation with schools on the proposed transfer of funds from the schools block to the high needs block. The proposed funding transfer was noted by the Children, Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee at its meeting on the 5th of November. Jane Moore, who's the Director of Children and Family Services, will take us through the report, and then Ivan Old, as the Cabinet Lead, will speak to the report. So over to you, Jane.
Thank you. So the report that you've got in front of you advises of the outcome of the consultation with the schools on the proposal to transfer up to 0.5% from the schools block to the high needs block in order to help manage the revenue budget position. So by way of background, the High Needs Development Plan has been established to make sure that we ensure the best possible use of the available resources within the high needs block, but also to develop new provision across Leicestershire, both in expanding existing mainstream and special schools. And the fundamental driver for the change around the High Needs Development Plan is around ensuring that children can be educated locally in inclusive settings that can meet their assessed needs. But we do know that the SEND provision in Leicestershire does need to be significantly increased to meet that rising demand. So in order to deliver the changes that we've set out within the High Needs Delivery Plan, there's been considerable revenue and capital investment. The total revenue investment is around about 9.1 million and the total capital investment is around about 22 million. And despite the activity that's set out within the High Needs Plan, it is projected that there will be a cumulative deficit that peaks at 13 million in 2021 before the budget becomes recovered in 24-25. So as explained in a previous report to Cabinet in October, consideration was given to transferring money between the schools block and the high needs block of the Dedicated Schools Grant in order to reduce the cumulative deficit. Local authorities are able to transfer up to 0.5% with the agreement of Schools Forum. If Schools Forum don't approve, then we can go to the Secretary of State to approve the transfer. So we took a report to Schools Forum in September to set out our intention to consult. We then did consult in October and received 103 responses. 84% of the respondents either strongly disagreed or disagreed with the proposal to the 0.5% transfer. And the consultation also received a number of significant comments around the transfer. One of the predominant issues that came up through the consultation was the disproportionate impact of the proposed transfer on schools in areas of high deprivation that were already receiving significantly low levels of funding. So at its meeting on the 6th of November, the Schools Forum did unanimously vote against the transfer, and they did make the statement, which I've included in the papers, but I do have a slightly amended version from Schools Forum. Schools Forum have said they don't agree with the proposals to transfer the 2 million or 0.5% from the schools block, and asks Leicestershire County Council not to appeal to the Secretary of State, but to appeal for improved funding for high needs SEN, either directly or through improved grant from government, and that the Forum welcomes the joint work to progress the high needs programme. So at the Cabinet meeting on the 22nd of October, Cabinet agreed that I could apply to the Secretary of State to agree the transfer if the proposal was rejected. And in considering whether to pursue this option, a number of factors have been taken into account. Firstly, there is a risk that reducing school funding could result in mainstream schools being less able to accommodate those children who are requiring support, resulting in more children needing higher cost provision outside of mainstream school. Secondly, a key element of the High Needs Development Plan is predicated on schools working with the local authority, and schools are engaging exceptionally well with the work of the High Needs Development Plan. Thirdly, the proposed 0.5% transfer would have the effect of reducing the high needs deficit by 2 million, so it would reduce it down to 11 million, but it doesn't bring forward the recovery period of the deficit. And finally, as highlighted in responses to the consultation, the transfer does disproportionately impact some of the schools that would otherwise be set to gain the most due to the fact that they're currently underfunded compared to other schools across the county and indeed nationally. And those schools are predominantly those ones in areas of higher deprivation. So in terms of the proposed action, the financial position of the council remains challenging, and it is essential that strong financial control is in place, particularly around the high needs block. As I said earlier, the schools have been engaging exceptionally well with the local authority plan and have made it very clear that they are committed to working with us to identify alternative methods for achieving the 2 million savings should the transfer not go ahead. So it is considered that these measures that we've identified and a continued focus on the actions set out in the plan could deliver the 2 million savings that would have achieved by the transfer. So it's therefore recommended that the transfer of funding from the schools block to the high needs block is not pursued at present. However, the Cabinet is asked to note that should the high needs deficit continue to increase in 2021, it will be necessary to consider further measures, including a possible transfer. So in terms of the recommendations, it was recommended that the outcome of the consultation is noted, that the transfer of funding from the high needs block is not pursued, and that I be authorised to engage with Leicestershire schools to develop alternative measures to address the deficit. And it should be noted that should the deficit continue to increase, it may be necessary to consider transfer of funding in future years. Thank you.
Thank you. It's certainly good that you've got good relationships with the schools, Jane. I think that's very important. Ivan?
Thank you, Leader. I attended the last school forum meeting as a participating observer. That's my role when I do go, and I listened very closely to the debate. There was unanimity around the table that this should not be pursued at this point in time. And in subsequent discussions with Jane, what we focused on is what we've achieved already. We know we're ahead of many other local authorities who are coming to terms with the overspend in SEND. One of my colleagues is looking at £15 million on this year alone. And we've got very good cooperation in terms of identifying schools who will take units, which helps us to deliver the aspiration to locally based education for children with special needs in their locality. So we're asked by the school forum, and I'm quite happy to reiterate what Jane has said, that they don't agree to the proposals at the moment, and they would ask us not to pass them this year, and would also ask us not to appeal to the Secretary of State. I think there's enough evidence in the paper for us to support that aspiration and to build upon the current good links that we've got with schools, particularly the secondary schools. In paragraph 33 is a major reason for shifting the decision, and that is that large secondary schools localised in areas of higher deprivation would have been more affected than those in other areas. That isn't the government's intent in terms of the additional funding that's coming into Leicestershire schools at the moment. So I will move the motion on the Green Order paper and recommend to Cabinet that we accept and endorse it.
Thank you, Ivan. Byron?
Yes, I'll second the motion.
We have no other speakers. All in favour of what Ivan moved and Byron seconded? Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Agenda item 6, delivering growth in Leicestershire, east of Lutterworth Strategic Development Area and other projects, pages 29 to 50 and appendices 225 to 240. This report details the outcome of work undertaken to identify the Council's objectives for the East of Lutterworth Strategic Development Area scheme, which could also be used when developing other County Council-owned sites. The paper also considers the options and the preferred approach and how this might be structured. The Scrutiny Commission did receive this report on the 6th of November and supported the proposed objectives and the outcomes of the options appraisal. I actually attended that meeting, and they were, to be fair, they were actually very positive and made some extremely good comments. Simon Lawrence, who's the head of major programs, yeah, sometimes it seems like a problem, but head of major programs will explain the issues. Simon.
Thank you, Leader. So, as you've set out in your introduction, the purpose of this report is to set out the scheme objectives for the East of Lutterworth scheme and the outcome of the delivery options appraisal that's been conducted over the last few months and that was shared with the Scrutiny Commission earlier in the month. By way of context for Cabinet, the East of Lutterworth scheme extends to approximately 550 acres of land, all of which is now in the control of the County Council. And this will see the development of up to 2,750 homes, 56 acres of employment land, 2 primary schools, a local centre, extensive open space and green infrastructure, together with major highway works, including the construction of a new spine road, a new motorway bridge and substantial off-site junction improvements. This is an exciting scheme that can demonstrate the Council's commitment to its strategic plan and outcomes through leading the delivery of an exemplar development in the county. The objectives of the scheme, developed in consultation with members and officers and considered, as you said, by the Scrutiny Commission earlier this month, are set out in paragraph 25. These, I'd suggest, are encompassed by the scheme aim, which is that the Council wants to achieve a high-quality mixed tenure community that should act as an exemplary project within the United Kingdom. It should contribute significantly to the County Council's social value objectives by creating added social, environmental and economic value, both during the development and ongoing operation of the site. In terms of the delivery options, these are set out in the report, paragraphs 31 to 42, and there were 5 delivery options considered. The analysis included within those appendices demonstrates that each of the options offer a variety of advantages and disadvantages to the Council, but that the joint venture options most closely match the Council's aspirations in terms of sharing risk, accessing appropriate skills, retaining control to secure its strategic plan outcomes, and generating a financial return. Paragraphs 96 to 101 set out the next steps for this important project, demonstrating there is still much to do. This will include further reports to the Cabinet as the preferred delivery option is progressed, and member involvement as well as the continued support from specialist consultants in developing this detail will be crucial. The matter regarding the funding of the Spine Road, however, cannot progress until the Government advises the Council on the outcome of the £31 million bid to their Housing Infrastructure Fund. The recommendations are as set out on the Green Order paper.
Great, thank you. I've got Byron first.
Yes, this is a major step forward in the programme that we have to bring forward development in Leicestershire with this enormous site which we've put together, and a venture to effectively be co-developers with it, with a partner, if we can find a suitable partner. And it really is, it's perhaps adventurous in some people's eyes, but done properly it could bring considerable benefits to the County Council, not least in the returns that we will get. There's some risk in it, but we'll have to manage that risk and manage it very, very carefully. I think the proposal's a good one, and therefore I'm going to propose the motion, paragraphs A to G, on the order paper.
Thank you, Byron. Trevor?
Thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to second that proposal. Now, what I'd like to say is that Byron deals with the investment side. I think in terms of local councils and how we actually work with the local planning authority to deliver a joined up approach to the strategic plan, I think this is an absolute exemplar, and this is where we really do score highly as a county council in a strategic sense. It also gives us, if I may draw members' attention to page 33 to paragraph 25, all the bullet points there, it also actually gives us control of what will be, I am sure, an absolutely exemplar development. And this is trailblazing for us, and I really think it's excellent, Leader.
Thank you. Well, I think so too. I mean, I just wrote down a few notes. I think it's exciting, it's innovative, it's aspirational. I'm going to have to use the exemplar word again. It is an exemplar scheme, so when we're on the doorsteps we can tell people about it. But also it features good design, and good design I know is a particular pet project of Richard's. So it features good design and good practice, and hopefully is super green. So it ticks all my boxes, and then of course it ticks the massive box at the end, is that we make a good profit out of it so we can fund other schemes throughout the county. So I'm super happy to support it. All in favour? Thank you, Simon. 7, Barrow Road Pool Farm Corn Development, Solar Farm and Light Industrial Units, pages 51 to 60, appendices 241 to 248. This paper sets out the outcome of further analysis of the proposed development and seeks approval to submit a planning application for a solar farm and light industrial unit on council-owned land. Please note we've received comments from Hilary Fryer, marked 7. They're attached to the order paper. Chris Tambini or even John will present the report. Then Byron, as the lead member, will say a few words. Are you doing it, John or Chris? John. Okay, Chris will kick off. Thanks, Chris.
I'm just going to set, I suppose, a bit of context, really. The Corporate Asset Investment Fund was established back in 2014. And in the current year, we're anticipating that we'll make £5.5 million worth of income. And we expect that to kind of more than double over the next 3 or 4 years. We have purchased a few assets, but actually much of that is going to come from actually developments within Leicestershire. And I know cabinet members have already been out to Apollo Court in Colville. We've got units coming on as well, Airfield Farm in Harborough, and we've got the Lucet building at Loughborough University Science Park. So there's a number of developments that are either on stream that will be coming on stream very soon. And this is just the latest proposal, and I'll let John kind of take you through the detail.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this relates to the proposed solar farm and the commercial development on Barrow Road between Quorn and Barrow. Since Cabinet last considered this proposal, we've been fine-tuning the development so we have robust costs and a viable scheme, and took into consideration the recent declaration of the climate emergency, as well as the revisions to the investment criteria in the Corporate Asset Investment Fund strategy in September in relation to the environmental and sustainability criteria. The declaration and the CAFE strategy update led to a rethink in how the commercial units should be developed, and we wanted to explore how we could make the units as efficient as possible and low carbon as possible whilst maintaining the viability. This work is ongoing to ensure that should Cabinet approve the recommendations today, when we get to build the units, they include as many of the applicable sustainable technologies and building techniques as possible. You'll see from Paras 22 on pages 54-55 a summary of the first phase of the scheme, namely the 62-acre solar farm and the 45,500 square foot commercial units on Barrow Road. It is recommended that although the 31,000 square foot scheme on Pool Farm is shown in Appendix D and outlined in Paras 32 to 33, that for the moment this is just kept for information only and will be brought back to a future Cabinet meeting should the demand outstrip the supply for the Barrow Road units. Should Cabinet approve the recommendations for this project, the planning application will be submitted very quickly, possibly next month, and Para 37 provides a summary of the stakeholders who would be consulted. Councillor Fryer, as has been mentioned, has previously asked that the Quorn and Barrow parish councils be included, and I can confirm that both will be. As regards the financial implications, you'll see on pages 56 to 58 a summary of the capital spend and likely income from the solar farm and the first element of the commercial scheme. You'll see that the total budget requested is 14 million, and this includes a contingency of 11%. The solar farm element is expected to cost 6.4 million, and in terms of income is expected to generate around £444,000 per year, an internal rate of return of 6.2%. The Barrow farm will generate the solar farm will generate 8,790 megawatt hours of energy, not the 8.79 that was mentioned in the report. Okay, was missing, for which I apologise, which is enough to power 2,500 homes, or enough to cover half of the energy cost of LCC's properties and all the street lights in the county. The commercial units have a capital cost of 6.15 million, and in order that the capital for the whole scheme is captured, the return for this element also included the contingency for the whole scheme of 1.545 million. So from a capital cost of 7.6 million and an income of 390,000, That generated an internal rate of return of 10.1%. Pages 56 to 58 cover some of the sensitivity analysis of possible fluctuations in energy prices, capital costs and rental income. Otherwise, the recommendations are as part of the Green Order paper. Thank you.
Great. Byron?
Yes, this is mine again. This is a fantastic scheme because it's extremely well thought out, and it accords with our new policies towards climate change, because it's using some of our land and investment to generate electricity in a clean way, not just through the solar farm, but also, of course, from the energy neutral, I think it's energy neutral, you said, units which we'll construct on part of the site. So it makes a lot of sense, and although it doesn't quite add up to making the whole council numerically carbon neutral, because it covers everything that we do, it doesn't actually do the major part of it, doesn't it, by generating more than 8 megawatts. Certainly covers County Hall and the street lights. So it's a good scheme, and it's worth doing, and I think it should command the support, so I'll move the motion.
Thank you, Byron. Trevor?
Thank you, Leader. Happy to second that motion. And in so doing, it's absolutely superb to see a scheme that comes along and offers 10.1%, as well as the carbon offset, as well as generating clean electricity. But what it also does is opens the doors to further things, and you've alluded to that in terms of the industrial units, as well as the possibility of direct sales to Severn Trent. And on that basis, we get an even greater return. So I'm extremely happy again with this, and I think it's super to see just how we can use our land and assets to generate electricity.
Okay, all I've got to say is we pass climate change emergencies and we actually act on it. So this is an example of not only passing the climate change emergency motion, but now beginning to act on it. We're generating clean, green electricity, and above all, we're making a return on it. So it goes to show that if you're innovative and thoughtful like we are, we can be green, clean, and generate money. So I'm really happy with this one as well. No other speakers. Can we have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you. Thank you. Tree management strategy, pages 61 to 66. A bunch of appendices, 249 to 304. This sets out a proposed approach to the management of the County Council's trees and woodlands, and includes a tree management and planting programme. I've just planted one out the front, only one, albeit, but everyone counts. We've received comments from Mr. Bolter. There are 8 which are attached to the order paper. Chris Tambini, again, Director of Resources, will take us through the report, and then I'll ask Blake to say a few words, but I suppose Nick's speaking to it, is he, Chris? Oh, very good. Your talents know no bounds. Okay, Chris, over to you.
Before I do so, I think most people know Nick Fell, who's our head of forestry. Yeah, who's I found out earlier actually. I knew he'd been here a long time. He's actually worked here for 40 years in February. So, and he'll be responsible for actually kind of driving through the strategy. In Leicestershire, there are actually over 5 million trees. I found that out this morning. And the County Council is responsible for managing around 82,000 trees and 400 hectares of woodland. The draft strategy kind of sets out the environmental, ecological and landscape benefits of the trees as you'd expect. And it also sets out, I suppose, some of the more drier aspects in terms of how we manage trees, including the standards we set in terms of the services that we provide, such as safety, tree safety. I think the difference between this strategy and the current strategy was actually published back in 2011, I think, is that since then, ash dieback has become a huge threat. And this is reflected within the strategy. I think Cabinet knows there is a separate ash dieback kind of work stream. But even so, to address the threat of ash dieback, resources are included within this plan. And hopefully over the next 2 years, we plan to plant an extra 25,000 trees, or maybe it's 24,999. Now you've planted one. In a variety of schemes, and there's a few kind of different schemes kind of set out in the tree management and plant and action plan that's attached to it. If approved today, the strategy will be consulted on widely. It will also go to scrutiny, and it will come back to Cabinet in March.
That's very good. So I've got Blake's going to speak on this.
Thank you, Leader. Just following on from the ash dieback, some months ago, I think we brought a report through that allocated about £500,000, actually £5 million, if I remember correctly, in dealing with ash dieback. We've identified it here in Leicestershire that being a significant concern, and DEFRA and the government actually used Leicestershire to launch the ash dieback toolkit, which we should be very proud of. I'm extremely proud to be able to move the motion on this Green Order paper. Although it technically falls within the Corporate Resources Department and the Corporate Property Department as a function, forestry naturally being a function of that department, I'm responsible for bringing forward the environment strategy, and as you know, and it's already been referred to, we declared a climate emergency here at the council some months ago, and we've allocated some monies into working out how we're going to address the carbon reduction targets by 2030. And what pleases me particularly about this strategy is trees play an important role, not only obviously in producing oxygen, but sequestering CO2, which not only helps with clean atmosphere, but also helps the environment immensely. So this is just one measure how we're taking the climate emergency seriously. We're doing all we can here in Leicestershire. The leader often says we're a blue administration, but we are a green council. Literally, our name is in green at the front of this desk, and it's very pleasing for me to be able to move the motion on the Green Order paper under 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Before I ask Richard Shepherd to second it, Nick, can you tell me what Mr. Bolter means about deciduous trees only help? Is he right, or?
He is correct, yes.
Microphone on, Nick.
He is correct. Evergreen species, because they hold the leaves all year, have much more of a capacity to absorb pollutants. But we do plant a lot of evergreens, and some of our natives are very useful evergreens for absorbing pollution. So yew, holly, Scots pine are all native evergreens that we use regularly in our planting. But we do use exotic species as well. A lot of our suburban areas and our urban areas where we do planting to soften the environment, we use exotic species. You yourself, Leader, have planted one this morning, that was in AC, a red maple, very nice in the autumn. And we've used species such as Homo, which is Councillor Bolter has mentioned. We've used that at Foss Park. So when the Foss Park development went in, some of the big trees now that are growing really well in the central reservations are Home Oak. I think the point regarding native species, though, does need to be raised, because native species support a lot of our ecosystems. They're vital for our ecosystems, and many bird species and other wildlife species rely on our native species. So we need to have a very close eye on climate change, how the temperatures are moving. We need to be using species which have an extensive southern range beyond Britain that can tolerate changes and rises in temperature. But at the same time, we must do everything we can to keep our native species there to protect our ecosystems.
Thanks for Nick. You're very knowledgeable, as usual. I've got Richard Shepherd.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really pleased to second this. This is a really good example of action on the environment and action on the climate issues. And it's a delight, if I may say so, Nick, to see you here and to hear your remarks just now. I mean, the knowledge and the detail is fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Indeed. Thanks very much for 40 years. You've nearly been here longer than the Chief. Okay, moved and seconded. Oh, you've been here longer, have you, Nick? Very good, very good. All in favour? Thank you very much. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Chris. 9, Melton Mowbray Local Plan Delivery Partnership Housing Infrastructure Bid 67 to 76. This paper advises Cabinet of the success of a housing infrastructure bid for the southern section of the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, and of discussions with Melton Borough Council regarding a risk-sharing agreement for the remaining funding of the road and related infrastructure. I'd like to personally thank the outgoing Member of Parliament, Sir Alan Duncan, for his support. I think without his support, we might not have been so successful, and we certainly got the announcement ahead of everybody else in the country, so he must have done something good there. We wish him well wherever he goes. So again, we've got Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, and Ian Veers, Assistant Director, E&T, who will explain the issues, and then I'm going over to Byron as the Cabinet Lead to speak. So, are you doing this, Chris? Have
I'm
a go.
going to start,
Very
and
good.
then Ian will kind of finish off. The order of the HIF grant is obviously a really kind of positive development. I'm going to leave Ian to kind of talk through the benefits of linking the northern and the southern sections of the distributor road to the new southern section, and I'll limit my comments really to finance and risk. The report sets out that the cost of both sections of road and the cost of the infrastructure, mainly schools that surround it, is in the order of £160 million. And although we've got about £64 million in central government grants, principally to finance the roads, we're going to be heavily dependent on developers to fund the balance, which is getting close to £100 million. And as a result, we are going to enter into a risk share agreement with the District Council, and the broad principles are set out in the report in paragraph 37. The risk share does help, but it is worth pointing out the County Council will bear the lion's share of the risk. And if you look within the detail of the report, you can see that the District Council is limiting its contribution to highways only and a maximum of £6 million. Having said all that, the funding and the associated risk is manageable for the County Council, and this is mainly because over the last 10 years some very kind of sensible finance decisions have been made, and we do have a strong balance sheet. This means that we have got the ability to kind of cash flow this development and wait for the Section 106 funding to come through at a later stage. Clearly, before we sign the agreement in terms of the HIF funding, we do need to get a signed agreement with the District Council around the risk share. I'll pass over to Ian now.
Thank you, Leader. The Melton Southern HIF bid was very much transport focused, delivering housing and economic growth, and it proposes extending the already proposals for 4.4 miles for the northern and eastern sections from Burton Road to Leicester Road, and will continue in the same vein in its current design form of a 7.3 metre road with a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. This will provide key access and further mitigation for Melton Town Centre, providing another route linking the whole of the as commonly known as the bypass around Melton, and we'll affectionately keep calling it that. It will help deliver 2,340 new homes and 20 hectares of employment land and open those up, and the 14.7 million Homes England funding combined with the 13.2 million developer funding we should get will help deliver a further 2 to 2.5 miles, depending on the design route, around the southern end part of Melton. Work to fully design the road is now starting, and we will seek planning permission with the developers and agree its delivery. It would be hoped that we would continue the northern and eastern sections delivery round, starting construction by at least 2023, if not sooner, if the various approvals go through well, and completing within at least 2 years. This should see within the next 5 years Melton having a full bypass being delivered. Gives, I think, the residents exactly what they've been asking for with the housing growth and economic delivery. And we do not take lightly the delivery of almost £100 million worth of infrastructure for Melton, but we are proceeding well with it. And the recommendations are as on the Green Order paper. Thank you.
Yes, there will be another little recommendation which Byron will move. And while before I call Byron, not only has Sir Alan Duncan helped with this, Byron himself has been, for the 20-odd years I've known him, he's been campaigning for this road, so some credit must fall to you, Byron.
Well, thank you, Leader, for that comment. It's been a long haul, as they say, in getting here, and we're within sight of the long-awaited ambition to get this bypass, as the Assistant Director has finally brought himself to call it, around Melton Mowbray. The first part of it, of course, we approved some time ago, and now this is the southern link, which actually completes what was originally envisaged as being the total length of the road that we were looking for. We had to do it in 2 phases. The financing of this is complex, as Mr Tambini referred to. because we are looking for some support from Melton Borough Council on this as well, through the council tax receipts and new homes bonus if that continues in the future. Because there's considerable risk to the county council in having to lay out the money before the section 106 contributions, developer contributions come in, and indeed we may have to put some of money from our own capital programme into it as well as of course the major grants that we have from the government, and the two grants, and in particular the one referred to in here, the housing infrastructure grant, which as part of our proposals here, if this is agreed this afternoon, which I'm sure it will be, we shall agree to accept, subject of course to the final agreement being signed with MBC on this one as well, because of their involvement. The extra item that's been referred to, that Leader just commented on, is now a new clause D, because there's now a clause E in the thing. The original papers only had clauses A, B, and C and D in the resolution. Now we've got A, B, C, D, and E. The new clause D comes about in the light of some discussions we've had in recent days, and in particular some information we've received through the Director of Public Health and his colleagues as well about air quality. I've been long concerned about the air quality in Melton, and in particular in the section of the road on Wilton Road, which is very close to the junctions of Leicester Road and Leicester Street. And it's fairly evident to me, although I've got no actual evidence to prove it, that the air quality there is very, very poor indeed, and I've breathed in lungfuls of rather unpleasant gases from the vehicles as they've been held up trying to get past the traffic lights. So what this clause does is ask the Melton Borough Council to do some measurements there and elsewhere as well in Melton Mowbray, to give us some assurance on air quality, so we know where we're starting from, and of course where we will get to when we've built the bypass. And I hope they agree to do that, because actually they're statutorily required to, but we're drawing attention to that particular requirement. So I'll move the 5 clauses of the motion. I hope it gets approval, and look forward to the road being built. And of course there is a target date, but we'll see if we get there.
Thank you, Byron. Blake?
Yes, thanks, Leader. So I too would like to thank and pay credit to the outgoing MP, Sir Alan Duncan, for the part he's played in achieving the grant and that coming forward to Leicestershire, but also to Byron and the other Melton Borough councillors, particularly Pam Posnett and others who I know have campaigned really hard to see a relief road in this part of Melton. And this takes us one step closer to completing the whole of that link road, which is good news for the residents of Melton. Whilst we're in the business of paying credit and tribute, can I just turn to the department that I lead and pay my thanks to the officers within the department for doing a sterling job in not only putting the HIF bid forward, but making sure that we've got an output from it. About £4 million worth of money has gone into developing business cases for the whole of this relief road, and it's all been coordinated through officers of the department with consultants. Without their work, this just simply would not have happened. We've taken the lead role in this, and I think the Leicestershire County Council Environment and Transport Department, and particularly the officers led by yourself, Ian, deserve all the credit for getting us to where we are right now. I certainly look forward to seeing it delivered in 2022 to 2024. But can I just reiterate the point that's just been made by Byron about air quality? We know through the first part of the relief road and through the scrutiny sessions that this work has been through that air quality, environmental pollution is of paramount concern, particularly those people that have objected to these proposals. And again, I think it's imperative that the borough and district councils, in this case it's Melton Borough Council, do actually discharge their statutory duty to measure and monitor the air quality, and then keep track of what's happening so we can take the necessary actions in the future to mitigate any concerns that might arise. But my view, this is a good scheme environmentally because it actually displaces the traffic that is otherwise going through the centre of Melton, causing those particular issues. And to that extent, and many others, this should be welcomed. Have no hesitation in seconding the motion. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Blake. Rich?
Thank you, Chair. It's worth commenting on during your administration that you should be delivering the Kegworth bypass and Melton Mowbray, long promised by many politicians. In fact, when I first served here in 1991, I was promising a bypass for Kegworth, and it went on many leaflets over tens and tens of years. But actually, during this time, we're seeing the fruition of that work, and it really is a combined effort. And actually, I'm really pleased to be sitting here today when we're passing these things, because it's what people have asked in these areas for so many years, and they thought they'd never get, and they will do. Thank you, Chair.
Trevor mentioned Kegworth.
Thank you. Well, there was a mention of Kegworth, and that is infrastructure, of course, and that's extremely important. And this is what the Melton Relief Road actually delivers. The shift that we get nowadays from the old planning system is that strategically we at County are committed to actually putting in as much infrastructure as we can, and we've led that, and we're going to continue, I'm sure, Leader, to do just that. And equally, of course, Castle Donington will have its relief road soon as well because of the same shift. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, ringing endorsement, I place on record my thanks to you and your team. I know you're short-handed down there, and it's a lot of work, but we are being successful. So thanks, Ian. Moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Thanks, Ian. What's the next one? Oh, you're here for that one as well, Ian. More work for you. A511 Growth Corridor Proposals, pages 77 to 90. And again, appendices 305 to 336. This report advises on the recent consultation regarding the A511 Growth Corridor proposals, which consist of a range of measures to ease congestion and deliver houses on employment land. The Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee received the report on November the 7th, and its comments are included in the pack. Over to you, Ian, to explain the issues, and then Blake, as lead member, will speak. And hopefully we can do it, because I drive that road every day when I come here, and it is pretty badly congested now. So, Ian.
Thank you, Leader. Firstly, I'd like to say, just following on from your comments, there are actually two air quality areas that need addressing on the A511 route, and hopefully this scheme will address both of those by easing the congestion, as we've heard described. So that's us also working to improve the environment. This is a £49 million scheme at the moment, and we're looking to bid for £42 million from the Department for Transport, and I'm pleased to say we've already been successful in securing £1.28 million from the Department for Transport towards the development costs, which, as Blake said earlier, are not small in these type of schemes. Colville has been designated for major growth for some considerable time, and in order to help deal with that, a Colville transport strategy was developed. Whilst the developer contributions would be coming forward to deal with that in a piecemeal fashion, the inclusion of the A511 in the major road network by the Department for Transport gave us the opportunity to seek all the funding we required in one go to deliver a whole basket of improvements up to £50 million. We've taken that opportunity. We are the only scheme that went forward from the East Midlands, and we are now pursuing the outline business case to be submitted by Christmas. We've already delivered schemes on this corridor, as members may be aware, at Junction 22 of the M1, Junction 13 of the M42, and also introduced not just road improvements, but walking, cycling and bus improvements as part of the local Sustainable Transport Fund, bringing that whole package of transport measures. The current proposal is being developed for the business case, which we have to submit on the 20th of December 2020. Very exacting timescales, as usual, from the Department for Transport Leader. Includes improvements to the 8 main junctions, an extension of the Barden Link Road, known locally as the Punch Through, and a section of dual carriageway which connects between two of the closest roundabouts on Thornborough Road and Whittier Road, Colville. And this will deal with those air quality areas. During the consultation, if I can just touch on the main themes that came up, Leader. Interestingly enough, One of the major feedbacks we had was the scheme does not go far enough. Residents wanted us to do far more. If we could bid for more money, we of course would be, but we're capped by a limit from the Department of Transport. But I think it's quite interesting. The level of the problems there drives people to ask us to do even more. We've been asked to have more walking and cycling infrastructure on top of what we've already delivered, the £3.5 million from the Local Sustainable Transport Fund. Unfortunately, the way that the fund is currently set up, it does not really score highly for delivering some walking and cycling and bus improvements, but we are now discussing with the Department of Transport on how they are changing their scoring category to see if we can include more as part of the design. And finally, understandably, there was concern from residents who have to make turns at certain junctions at Broomleys and the Flying Horse roundabout that those could be prohibited and are currently being proposed as part of our design. We've taken those comments back. We will continue to work the design up and then feedback to not only the local residents but the local member as we do further consultation. The next steps are to submit, as I said, the outline business case. Full business case will have to be submitted by 2022, and if successful, we would start not long after, because if HS2 continues, we need to be completed within 2 years before the route starts taking heavy traffic for that construction. The recommendations are set out on the Green Order paper. Happy to take questions.
Very good, Ian. I've got Blake.
Yes, once again, following on from the last report, it's a privilege to be able to sit here and move this motion and take this particular project and scheme onto the next step. You know, we've done a consultation. We're not pretending that it's been entirely positive, the feedback, but interestingly, the feedback we've had, where it has been negative, it's because we're not doing enough. And I think what we need to explain to people is the pot of money, the fund that the governments have made available is limited to £50 million. This is a £49 million scheme. If we could do more and there's more money, we certainly would do more. And it won't stop us from exploring in the future further schemes that can improve the area, not least for the health benefits and the air quality issues that have already been described. And what's really pleasing me about this scheme as well is the joint working with North West Leicestershire Council. I know we intend to go into a memorandum of understanding, as we should be doing with other district and borough councils, where 106 monies play a vital role in delivering these projects, and it's pleasing to see that we're cooperatively working with North West Leicestershire Council on that front. The scheme's a good one in my opinion. Just one further note, when we took this through scrutiny, while it was widely welcomed actually at scrutiny, but I do appreciate there are some members of this authority, namely Mr Peter Bedford, that's expressed some concerns about some of the measures within the scheme that affect perhaps Markfield. I just want to give reassurance that all the members of the scrutiny panel have been on a tour of the route and have had the wider scheme explained to them. And if we can deliver this scheme, it will provide the breathing space to enable a wider transport strategy for Colvin and the surrounding area to address the localised traffic issues that Mr Bedford is concerned about. I'd love to do more, but the pot's limited at 50 million, and on that basis, I'm very, very happy to move the motion on the Green Order paper. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Trevor?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as the former Regen and Planning portfolio holder for North West Leicester, I really do appreciate what this means. We were unable to get that punch through brought forward, and now you've done it. And I think Ian T, Blake, and you, Ian, deserve an absolute round of applause for it, because Colville desperately needed just that. It has dealt with the two air quality management areas as well. That's again superb in terms of the health profile of Colville residents. Really good indeed. Again, it shows just how continued work with our district and borough councils can bring about long-term change and, of course, for the better. In the end, it adds critical mass to the development corridor. One day, leader, that Burton line might just be coming closer, but I still think it's a long way on the horizon, but this critical mass is where, you know, we need to build the case for. Happy to second.
Very good. You managed to weave the Ivanhoe line into it, which is imaginative. I mean, what I think this shows, Ian, is that it's the early work that paid the dividends. I know we got the 1.8-ish million to design it fully, but the early work because I serve on Connect and all that stuff, as you know, so when we were looking through the MRN for quick wins, which the government asked for, we'd got something on the blocks which we could bid for. Then we got the 2 million-ish, and now we can design it up. So again, it's early work where there is no funding from them, which does pay dividends. And also we need to remember that although this is a road, you wouldn't think it would be green. But in my view, it is green because it stops traffic being parked up, belching out fumes at traffic islands and traffic lights. So when we say we're going to be green, that doesn't mean we're not going to lobby for roads and transport and infrastructure. Of course we are, because this deals with the 2 AQMAs and stops cars being parked up. Because the worst thing, well, cars actually not too bad because they now switch off, a lot of them, but buses and lorries parked up at traffic islands and traffic lights are where the air quality issues arise from. So I think this is a green road for Colville, and I'm happy to support it. All in favour? Thank you. Well done, Ian. Are you staying for the next one? No. All right. We've got young Tom now. Annual Delivery Report and Performance Compendium 2019, pages 91 to 100, appendices 337 to 460. This report sets out the Council's performance over the past year, how we've delivered on the priorities in our strategic plan and departmental service plans, and how Leicestershire's performance compares with other councils. We are doing very well, but as we continue to be the lowest funded council in the country, this, of course, continues to have an impact on delivery, performance and council tax levels. We did win the Empower survey again for the third year running, which is fantastic. And when I was at the CCN conference only earlier this week, other county leaders were coming up to me and they were just saying, how come you managed to do it with so little money? Well, I think it's a credit to us all here that we do manage to win it. So you're going to present it, Tom, and then I'm going to ask Byron, who leads on it, to speak.
Yes, thank you. The first part of the paper covering the delivery report sets out progress over the last 12 months in delivering the priorities and outcomes in the Council's strategic plan and other service strategies. The report shows there are strong examples of achievement across all the work of the Council, but also that there's been success in securing savings through transformation whilst mitigating the impact of those savings on services and outcomes for residents. I'll just pick out a few achievements across the main areas of activity. In relation to the economy, specific achievements include the new Apollo and Airfield business parks, further rollout of superfast broadband, skills initiatives such as the new NW Learning Centre. We've got a new China strategy and a new tourism growth plan, and support to market towns has continued through the LEADER programme. On transport, you've heard about some of that already this morning, but there's been significant work on road and rail priorities, including the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road and major schemes in Hinckley, Loughborough, Colville and at Anstey Lane, together with work on the Midlands Connect rail strategy and plans for better rail services to Birmingham and Coventry. Also a strong focus on road safety, new speed cameras, rural speed protection measures. On housing, there's been a continued corporate focus on that through the approval of the Strategic Growth Plan, a new social care accommodation plan, the Housing Infrastructure Fund bids, you've heard about one of those already, and the expansion plans for east of Lutterworth, again, which you've heard about this afternoon. Good progress on health and social care integration and adult social care through the Better Care Fund. Range of interventions has led to good performance on reducing delayed transfers of care, and the local transforming care programme continues to support individuals with complex learning disability to resettle in the community. Continued focus on public health services to meet and improve outcomes in a context of having less overall grant in that area. Work includes the Unified Prevention Offer, social prescribing, new integrated healthy lifestyle service, and a stronger focus on work on mental health issues. In terms of children and families and safer communities, new school places and new schools opened at Lubbersthorpe and Newlands Primary. Significant focus on children's social care improvements, with 2 out of 3 Ofsted criteria now rated good, and ambitious plans in place to make significant investment in SEND provision. The new Children and Families Wellbeing Service has been launched, and continued good outcomes being achieved through the Supporting Leicestershire Families Service. In terms of the communities, significant delivery through a new project on loneliness and social isolation, and continuing work on the Shire Community Grant Scheme, volunteering support and work with parish and town councils. And last but certainly not least, on the environment, an enhanced environment strategy being prepared to help tackle the climate emergency, including through reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the new 100% renewable electricity tariff, planned solar farm, more electrical vehicle charging points, and many other things too. So lots of positive progress across all those themes. The second part of the report picks up on the performance compendium, and that looks in more detail at the current comparative position. As you mentioned at the start, Leader, the report highlights that Leicestershire continues to be the lowest funded county in the country, and a significant differential with other authorities, particularly perhaps the London boroughs. All counties are experiencing increasing demand pressures and funding pressures, and the service pressures section in that paper highlights how this is impacting on a range of services and outcomes for residents. And as a result of the analysis in the report, a number of improvement areas are flagged in paragraph 30, where there's an enhanced focus required to maintain outcomes. Despite those pressures, as you mentioned, the council has been ranked the most productive council in England by Empower, so that's a really positive affirmation of the council's work. So in summary, a lot to be positive about, but equally important that the recent delivery doesn't hide the many significant challenges, pressures and risks to continued delivery. And finally, just to mention that the report was considered by Scrutiny Commission. They welcomed having an annual report which drew together the delivery and performance issues in one place, and also welcomed the broadening of the report to provide a fuller picture on funding, demand pressures, service quality and risks. And some of the detailed comments made by the Commission are set out in paragraph 32, and the recommendations are as set out on the Green Order paper.
Thank you, Tom. Byron leads on this. Byron?
Yes, I mean, this, I suppose, is the really good news report this year. 2 parts, as Mr. Pennell says. The report on how we're delivering our strategy, which is very important, that it's showing that we are getting on with it and doing the things we said we were going to do. And the second part, of course, looking at our performance. An external body like Empower have looked at that as well, and in particular looking at the people delivered services as opposed to the place delivered services is the main thing, and they're showing there that we are the most productive council in the country for the 3rd year running, which of course is a tremendous encouragement for everyone who works for the county council and involved with the county council. But there's always more that you can do. We have got programmes in place which will, we know, where we can probably get even greater productivity in certain sections without actually reducing the service offer that we're making, and that's the important thing. I mean, in the past we've had to do that to a degree in order to keep within the financial envelope in the austerity programmes. But it's hard work, but it does show that we've got a very good team of officers and managers who manage all our programmes, and that they're continuing to bring success to the target in the way they do that, and meeting the targets we set them. So it's I shall welcome this, and of course it will go to full council, won't it? So I shall be saying more then when that happens. So I'll move for this meeting the motion on the Green Order paper, which is sections A to G, I'm sure someone will second it.
Yes, well, I'm seconding it, Byron, so don't worry. I'm happy to second it, and also to pick out just one of the recommendations, that the council continues to press its case for fair funding settlement and pursue other major savings initiatives. So, I mean, the main one is we do desperately need fair funding. I mean, in my view, we've virtually run out of areas where we can make savings. I mean, some of the ones we've made have been unpopular, and if we have to continue to make them, they'll be even more unpopular. And I just don't think it's fair that we are funded quite so badly when we pay the same amount of council tax as other areas, or even more than some areas of the country, and yet we don't receive what we're supposed to receive. And I think ultimately, going forward, if we don't receive funding, the performance will suffer because we've got nowhere else left to go. But I'm happy to support it. I should be happy to support you at full council, Byron, but it's worth mentioning that without fair funding, we're heading to a bad place. All in favour of Byron's recommendations? Thank you, Tom. Delivering Wellbeing and Opportunity in Leicestershire, Adults and Communities Department, Ambitions and Strategy 20 to 24, Permission to Consult. This is on pages 101 to 108, appendices 461 to 488. It's a report about delivering wellbeing and opportunity in Leicestershire for adults and communities and seek the Cabinet's approval to consult on the draft strategy. Note, please, that the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee received a report on the 11th of November 2019. A copy of the draft minute is attached to the order paper marked 12. Sandy McMillan, Assistant Director of Adults and Communities, has joined us to present the report. Then I'll call Richard as the Cabinet lead member. So are you doing it, Sandy? Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. There are currently a number of medium-term strategies covering the department. We've got promoting independence and supporting communities for adult social care, and separate strategies for communities and wellbeing services and adult learning. And the proposal is now to have a single departmental strategy for the period 2020 to 2024. And this is in line with the Council's corporate strategy 2018 to 22, with the overarching focus will be to focus on improving the well-being of people in Leicestershire. And well-being encompasses both the universal offer from libraries, heritage and arts, and adult learning, and also the well-being responsibilities contained within the Care Act to promote the well-being needs of people who may need care and support. The focus will still remain on promoting the independence of people and managing demand for services. And the thread of preventing need, reducing need, delaying need and meeting need will carry on from the previous adult social care strategy. The latest draft of the strategy is included within the appendix you have today. There's already been some engagement with partners, and the general direction, particularly from our colleagues in the NHS, has been very supportive of the draft strategy. And a key area within the strategy will be are outlined in paragraph 21. And one of those key aims is to improve customer experience and satisfaction. We already have quite a lot of feedback from surveys, but we'll be using the consultation to gain further views on how we can make further improvements. The draft strategy and consultation materials, as you outlined, were presented to Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 11th of November, and the committee's comments are available to you. I think, in summary, the committee were supportive of the draft strategy, and they've made some helpful comments which will be incorporated into the consultation materials going forward. Overview and Scrutiny will be asked to comment further as part of the consultation process at their meeting on the 20th of January, and the outcome from the consultation will be reported to the committee on the 8th of June 2020. And the process for the proposed consultation is outlined in paragraphs 28 to 33 of the report, and the draft consultation materials are also included in the appendices before you today. And the recommendations are contained in paragraph 2, specifically asking for agreement for a period of consultation of the draft strategy from the 16th of December to the 22nd of March. And if approved, a report will come back to Cabinet on the 23rd of June 2020, making recommendations to approve a final strategy. and if approved, that strategy would be implemented from July 2020. Thank you.
Rich?
Thank you, Chairman. Over the last 2.5 years, I've shared with Cabinet all the different things we've tried to do to meet the needs of adult social care, adult learning, keep our libraries and museums open, and be under budget every year. This really is where we go next. So it's as important as the past. It's no good unless we continue to make improvements. I think we're pulling them all together a little bit more, which is good. They are all part of one department, but they often were slightly in silos, so there's a lot more across overarching sections here. It is only the very first stage. This is just going out for consultation. It's pleasing to see the comments of scrutiny at the beginning, because that shows we're on the right track. There's always pressures, there always will be pressures, and what we've tried to do in this department is to meet them, and it's a credit so far to represented adults on this cabinet. But more importantly, if we get this right, we're setting ourselves for 2020 to 2024, because as we all know, there's more pressures to come. If we don't look forwards, we'll be in trouble. So I'm very happy to move the recommendations on page 5 and 6, the Green Order paper.
Thanks, Rich. Louise?
I'm very happy to second the recommendation.
We have no other comments. All in favour, please. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Annual report of the Director of Public Health, Leicestershire's health, physical activity, moving to a whole system approach, pages 109 to 114, and appendices 489 to 520. It is the annual report from the Director. Health and Overview and Scrutiny Committee received a report on the 13th of November, and a copy of the draft minute is attached to the order paper marked 13. Mike Sands, who, as you all know, is the Director of Public Health, is here to present the report. Then I'll call Lee to say a few words. So, Mike.
Thank you, Leader. So to start with, the usual reminder from me that I've got the statutory duty to produce an independent report on the health of the population of Leicestershire, and this is this year's effort. The last couple of years I've taken a largely kind of data-based and infographic approach to the annual report and really let the data speak for itself. So last year we looked at multimorbidity and the challenge that posed to cost on the NHS and social services. 2 years ago, I took a broad-based overview of the health of the population and really used that just to generate a conversation with the public about what was important. 2 years ago, what was kind of most, or the most interest there was around air quality. So it's pleasing to see that 2 years on, a number of the items on the Cabinet agenda have reflected that interest and concern around doing something about air quality. This year I've been a little bit more directive about the topic, so I've deliberately chosen physical activity. Cabinet may remember a report from Sport England, the Active Live survey, which I brought to Cabinet around about this time last year, which had some concerning figures about the levels of physical activity in Leicestershire, A, deteriorating, and B, being below the national average. So I wanted to look in a bit more detail at what we could do about that. I've also been a little bit more directive about what I want to get out of it. Last year, as I said, I've been happy to let the data talk for itself. This year, I've put forward a view that we need to follow a whole systems approach to physical activity, joining up the dots between organisations and indeed within the council around what we need to do to increase those levels of physical activity. Having said that, I've managed to shoehorn quite a lot of data in there anyway and try to present it in a format that's hopefully fairly easy to understand. I draw your attention to 2 or 3 bits of the data in the report. So lurking on page 494 of the meeting pack, I know it's buried deep within the huge amount of detail, I've put in a physical activity profile for Leicestershire that looks at a number of physical activity indicators. I won't go into detail, but I can see you've got colour copies, and my summary of that would be there's not enough green on the table. The indicators are rated by whether we're green above the national average, amber roughly similar, or red below. Further on, there is information in there about district level info on the percentage of people using physical activity, walking and cycling to get to work or for travel, as opposed to leisure. I think that's looking on page 502 of the meeting pack. And again, in colour, if you look at that, the summary from me would be there's too much red. There's just basically we're below the national average in most districts for the percentage of people using physically active modes of transport for travel. There is some sort of better news in there. So further on, there's information about children and young people. I think it's page 507, that one. And although the confidence intervals by the time you get down to children's physical activity levels at districts are relatively large, generally I'd argue that the children's physical activity levels within Leicestershire show up reasonably well compared to the adults one. So we are doing something at least comparable to the national average around children. So there is stuff in there which is not so good, and some stuff which is reasonable. In terms of an approach about how we go tackling this one, what I'm going to say, there is no silver bullet, there is no magic one thing that we can do that would improve physical activities within Leicestershire. However, lots of people over the last year or two have talked about taking a whole systems approach to physical activity, and I've dug into the detail of what that might look like. So what I've presented in the report is the need to tackle 7 different areas, the 6 actives, and then the one-off, which is physical activity as medicine. So by taking action across the 6 actives and the other one, I think that can pull together a sense of what we need to do. Those 6 actives are active environment. This isn't just about utilising the green space and the green assets that we've got within Leicestershire. This is about embedding active design principles within the infrastructure developments that we've got coming through Leicestershire, working with planners, etc., etc. We're currently working on that healthy design guidance, which we'll share with districts, but again, referring to an earlier agenda item, Lutterworth gives us an example to apply these principles to our own developments, as well as working with other people. And working with Simon Lawrence has been really, really good work with Simon to make certain that we make Lutterworth as healthy as we can. Closely linked to that is active travel, so more familiar territory about how do we encourage people to get to work via cycling, public transport and by walking. Again, we talked about infrastructure routes and cycle paths with Ian Veer's agenda item around Colville earlier on. And we need to do that ever more, working with our partners in district councils. Active early years, I've alluded to earlier on. We're currently rolling out our whole schools approach to physical activity across all schools in Leicestershire. Realistically, this is a mini version, I suppose, of the whole thing that I put forward in the report, where we're working with schools on things like crocodile walking groups to encourage children to walk to school safely, as well as what kids can do around being physically active within the school setting. That's closely related to active people and families. So the best way to get children active is to work with the families. The best way to get families active is to work with the children. And that addresses the familiar territory for us of working through district councils on making the inactive active, those targeted programs of physical activity, things like Nordic walking for people with cardiovascular disease, for instance, to encourage them to be safe but more physically active whilst living with a condition. Active workplaces, again, recognising for a number of us, if you're lucky to have a job, you spend an awful lot of time at work, and it's important that you try and make that as active as possible. Again, not just getting to work, but things like standing desks when you're at work and encouraging people to be physically active during the working day. And lastly, last of the actives is active communities. So that encompassing one about how do you engage the community to encourage themselves and support themselves to be more active. And again, the community grant scheme, Shire grant scheme, may give us a way of encouraging that ourselves. The one-off is physical activity as medicine, recognising that physical activity is probably the best buy for medicine there is. There are things that we do, which is around promoting and funding the exercise referral scheme through GPs, but there are lots of other things. So we've currently got an interest in working with UHL on what's called prehabilitation. So for those people who are about to undergo surgery, how do we make certain that that their physical activity levels are good, because they then stand a better chance of undergoing surgery and having a successful outcome from surgery at the end of it. So the other end of the journey from rehab. So by pursuing such coordinated action across the system, I think we can put in place something that would draw on the strengths that we've had around physical activity programmes, but really pull together ourselves and in particular district councils to work towards this whole system approach. It's less about me and my department, but I guess more about wanting to put a message out there about all working together on physical activity. Lastly, this was considered by scrutiny on November the 13th, and I think the comments are appended somewhere in the papers. And then lastly, the recommendations are as set out in the Green Order paper.
Well, tell me, before I call you, tell me something. How can you challenge the district councils to ensure that they are promoting physical activity? I know they have responsibility to look at it, but they seem to lack a bit of challenge to act.
We do work with them, so there are the targeted programmes of work where we still fund an element of that, and they've taken on board the message that in the mix of the sport and leisure offer, that they need to look at what they do for making the inactive active and doing outreach as opposed to just relying on the leisure centre offer. The planning work is going well. So through Dave Stock, a colleague at Leicester and Rutland Sport, Dave is part funded by Sport England. he's pursuing good relationships with ourselves and with district planners, district chief executives to pull them together to get this active design guidance in place and implemented. So we've had good support from the Strategic Planning Group, SPG, which has got all the planners across districts as well as the City Council as well in that case.
Because when I look at the active travel one, there's only reds and yellows. There's nothing good news in there at all, is there?
The only good news being that there's always opportunity to do better. And I guess things like the planning guidance we've presented the data. Please work with us to improve the offer that there is.
Then just one other small thing. As you know, I'm keen on Shire grants. You mentioned Shire grant schemes. Have you got money you could put into Shire grants to promote some of your healthy schemes?
Well, as you know, the budget position is very tight. We would always what we normally do is if there's anything that's coming through the Shire grant scheme is to look at that and make certain that it addresses the health impact that we can with it. Whether we put any more on it from my budget, it would be another question.
That's what we're looking for, money rather than any look at it. Oh, anyway, Lee, it's over to you. It's your portfolio.
Thank you, Leader. I think Byron was happy with our financial position when we had our Star Chamber earlier this week, so I mean, hopefully we're in a good position. It is interesting. I mean, your comment on the amber and red. I mean, it's. I'm sure we are a green council, so I'm sure Mike would love to see those indicators go green over the sort of years going forward. Annual report has a very wide remit. I think he's chosen very well this year. I think really what Mike and his team are looking to do is help people to help themselves. A lot of what we see there is fact. Statistics for UK deaths attributable to obesity. 30,000 people in this country die from obesity. A lot of that can be helped by physical exercise, and I think really the report highlights that. So I thank Mike for a very informative report. It was good. Scrutiny considered the report, and they said it was a very easy to read, visually attractive, and clearly set out the actions that needed to be taken to improve the health of the population for Leicestershire. And I'd certainly agree with that. I think this is a great starting point. I think it will start that debate, as his paper report a couple of years ago did as well. I think just one for me, at the end of the report on page 516, feedback on recommendations that he made in 2018. I think quite often reports are generated and people say, what do we do with them? But if you look on those 2 or 3 pages there, it shows what we've actually done since that report was generated and the response and actions that we've taken as a council. So I'm more than happy to recommend the recommendations on the Green Paper, Leader.
Thanks, Lee. Ivan.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mike, because I think that when you read this paper, I would endorse the sentiments that the Scrutiny Committee have done. I particularly looked at page 494, where there are 22 sectors, but only 2 at the moment are green. So you're quite right when you say we must look to bring far more from amber into the green area. And then I looked at what are the benefits of leading an active lifestyle, and I wondered, how do we get this message out to the public? Do we use Leicestershire Matters? Do we focus on physical activity benefits for adults and older adults, that's 18 plus? And it struck me that there were areas here that would be of general interest to people that I wouldn't want to see come from the local magazine that I get from Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council. If we're taking the lead, I'd like to see it reflected in some of our documents. Very good report, very happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you indicate, Blake? I've got you written down. Okay, Blake.
Yes, just following on from the point that Ivan's made about promoting and communicating, I want to take this opportunity as lead member for the Environment and Transport Department to remind people about the Choose How You Move. It's a little bit disappointing, a brilliant report by the way, but disappointing that on so many of the indicators we are below average. That's not how it should be in Leicestershire. One of the dichotomies I have as lead member is people writing to me concerned about ever-increasing traffic in their area, and one of the things we know about is a lot of local traffic is generated locally. People use their motor vehicle, me included, to get into their local market town and what have you. And one of the things we've just done under the Choose How You Move banner here in Leicestershire is acquired a lot of electric bikes, and we've had a degree of success of going into businesses, notably Next and other businesses, and hopefully trying to create an environment where we encourage business to look at these as viable forms or modes of transport for people that work in those businesses to use. But we did an exercise last week, and I think some publicity will be going out next week where a number of us rode those electric bikes. And I have to say, I'm a keen cyclist. this. And I quite like the energy I have to put in and what I get out. But for those people that aren't so interested in exerting their energy, these electric bikes are fantastic. They really do give you that assistance, almost like you're on a moped. It's a very fun way of not only upping your activity levels, but getting around the place that you live. And it has so many benefits, not least environmentally. So we're going to promote this, but whatever we can do to, show people out there that there are alternative modes of transport, the electric bike, in my opinion, will be a game changer. It really does mean that people who aren't particularly active can enjoy cycling without much of the effort that is needed. And it'll help the congestion on the roads and, like I say, the health agenda and the environmental agenda that we're set upon here in Leicestershire. Thank you.
Also, when I've been abroad, I've used electric scooters, but I mean, at the moment they're illegal on the sidewalk here, but there's no reason why they should be. Mike, earlier on, we had a little briefing on air quality. And I was wondering, I know you're the Director of Public Health and entirely separate almost to us. Would that be something you'd be willing to look at for next year's report on the whole issue of air quality throughout the county or not?
I think, as I say, it's interesting. We sort of really first started talking about health and air quality a couple of years ago in the annual report. That's coming up a lot. To me, it doesn't matter if you call it climate change, carbon neutral, air quality or active travel. There's an interest in the range of kind of environment, transport and public health related solutions which would address it. So it's probably right to come back, and in the same way that last year wanted to look in more detail at physical activity, we'll go away and consider if there's a kind of framework we can do the same for air quality more generally next year.
That would be good, because it's certainly of great interest to a lot of people. Although, as you said in your report, air quality has gone up over the years with cleaner vehicles and that, people's perception of the damage it does has also exponentially gone up. And I think you said in the briefing you gave us that in Leicestershire probably 100 people a year die of bad air quality.
Meant to say this morning, but for the benefit of Cabinet, we often use a line that Rob Howard, who presented this morning, says that if you deleted the word air and inserted the word water and said 100 people in Leicestershire would die of poor water quality, we wouldn't be having a debate about an annual report in a year's time. We'd be doing it now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can do one. Okay, so you've had a ringing endorsement of it. Are we all in favour? Thank you. Another one from you here, Mike. Leicestershire Substance Misuse Strategy 2023. This is on pages 115 to 122, appendices 521 to 536. This time seeking approval of the Leicestershire Substance Misuse Strategy. Again, for noting, the strategy was considered by the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee on September the 11th, and its comments are included in the report. I'll call you first, Mike, and then, of course, this again falls to Lee.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of the strategy, as I said when we presented the draft strategy at Cabinet, was to move from a fairly tight focus on the recommissioning of substance misuse treatment services, which we've had to do over the last few years because of the budget necessity, and opening up a debate about a broader set of priorities for the Council to pursue around substance misuse. This reflected issues such as changing trends in drug usage, the increase in usage of novel psychoactive substances, otherwise known as legal highs, and also thinking about the links between substance misuse and community safety and those with dual diagnosis, substance misuse and mental health issues. As such, the 5 priorities put forward in the draft strategy, which we then went out to consultation on, are set out in paragraph 23. They were to raise awareness and prevent the harms of drug and alcohol misuse, particularly those at greatest risk, developing a coordinated approach to early identification of individuals exposed to harm caused by alcohol and drugs, develop an approach to the provision of treatment and recovery services that responds to those changing trends in addiction, reducing ill health and deaths as a result of alcohol and drug misuse, and ensuring a joined up and timely response to changing patterns of substance misuse and emerging issues. So we undertook an 8-week consultation with public, with service users, with service organisations and providers. We received very few responses from the general public. I think we only got about 8 in total, but we got good engagement from service users and staff in the provider organisations. Paragraph 19 in Part B of the report sets out the key findings from the consultation. Largely, they were broadly supportive of the strategy, and we didn't really get any debate or disagreement with the broad thrust of what we were putting forward as the 5 main objectives. However, there were a number of suggested amendments to the detail of what lies beneath those main headings, and indeed more general comments on how we might work together better to ensure, again, a better join-up around substance misuse across agencies and sectors. Those are themed in Appendix A, which is in the appendix to the meeting pack. We did incorporate a number of changes based on that thematic detail, which is detailed in paragraph 20 in Part B. I think they're all very sensible comments which we were happy to include, particularly useful in strengthening the links between substance misuse and domestic violence, which we didn't really comment on in the draft strategy, and strengthening links with locality community safety partnerships, which again has been an area of concern for some time from districts around how Turning Point might engage with them better. So we've included those comments in a revised strategy which we're presenting today. Health and Overview Scrutiny Committee considered the report at its meeting back in September, the 11th of September. Again, comments of the committee are detailed in paragraphs 21 and 22. They were broadly supportive, but like the public consultation, made a number of detailed comments about what we might do beneath the broad priorities. So as I say, the comments have been incorporated into a revised strategy, and the recommendations are set out as in the Green Order paper.
Thank you. Mic off. Mic off. Mic. Microphone.
Sorry.
Off. Sorry. Lee.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I think the strategy to be approved is a good strategy now. I think once again consultation's shown that we do listen. We have made slight amendments which were picked up by Mike there. I think we do things very well in Leicestershire. I mean, the last recommendation is that the Director of Public Health be authorised to produce an implementation plan to deliver upon the priorities of the strategy. And we do that well. We are an exemplar in Leicestershire. That's not just myself saying that. We had the Director of Public Health England visit us last week, and he came here because we are just that. So that's down to the Chief Exec, but also down to our Director of Public Health. So very well respected, and I'm very happy that that will be handled well. And yes, happy to make and move the motions on the Green Order paper. Thank you.
I didn't realise we had the global director for it, so well done. Ivan?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, if I look at paragraph 15 in Part B, there are some interesting statistics here that don't just apply to Cabinet, they apply to the Safer Communities Strategy Board, to the Children's Partnership. If we get investment in treatment services for individuals with drug misuse, it reduces crime by 23%. Alcohol misuse, 48%. Financial benefits to social care, 1.3 million per annum, and economic benefits of 7.5 million per annum. These are big figures, particularly for a cash-strapped council. And I'm really pleased that Children and Family Services work very closely with Public Health and the Health and Wellbeing Board in order to deliver this. Happy to second the motion on the Green Order paper.
Again, very good. Moved by Lee, seconded by Ivan. All in favour? Thank you, Mike. 15, response to the consultation of Leicestershire. It's actually Leicestershire and Rutland Fire and Rescue Service Integrated Risk Management Plan 20 to 24, pages 123 to 128, appendices 537 to 574. It is what it says on the tin. Scrutiny Commission received the report on the 6th of November. Comments are included, and the Chief, John Sinnott, is going to present the report. Over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, this is a paper which enables the Council's response to the Fire Service on its consultation to go ahead by next Monday, which is a deadline. The recommended response, which reflects the comments of scrutiny, is what's in front of the Cabinet, but I understand Mr Shepherd may wish to suggest an amendment.
Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's important, of course, we do respond to this. If I could suggest a change to the Proposal 1 comments. It's on page 573, actually, of your appendix pack. The suggestion is just a slight variation. The current wording reads, fourth line down, unable at present to meet. I think it would be perhaps more accurate to say, unable at present always to meet. And the second variation, I would suggest adding a final sentence at the very end after everything else, which would read, the County Council welcomes the intention to record response times from receipt of the 999 call. That would be a welcome step, I think. So I propose those two variations. Otherwise, if I may propose the response as you've seen drafted.
Yep, I think they're good amendments. Trevor?
Happy to second those with the 2 amendments, Chairman.
All happy? Thank you. Item referred from over and scrutiny, there are none. Items which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent, there are none. So that brings the meeting to a close. I thank you all for attending.